Yes.
So it's my great pleasure to be able to introduce Dr. Daniela Dumbravă to this round of seminars that we have in the Center of World Christianity here at the School of Oriental and African Studies, University of London. Dr. Dumbravă is no stranger to our college because she was here in order to carry out research which led her, or which helped her complete her doctoral research into the into the travels of Nicolae Milescu, who was producing maps for the Tsars, essentially. So he was. It was a Eurasian enterprise, and actually. What I never told you is that your research actually
early modern history
reinforced my interest in the populations of Siberia, and that's why that was one of the reasons why I decided to study Manchu. So, and Manchu's studies here are blossoming. So it's that made me very happy. So anyway, so and then in the course of her studies, she also covered the interrelation, you could say the interrelationship between the Orthodox Church and the Western churches. So it's an East-Western Orthodox Christian communication that you find in her work as well, which I thought made her very suited for this circle that we have. I had been expecting, before I reconnected with Dr. Dumbravă, I had been expecting more communications in the same direction, but actually I was very pleasantly surprised when I found out that you were studying the very complex relationship of communities in Lebanon, which is of course today's topic. Lebanon, I know very well myself. I spent some time there. The American University, but the Western part of the Middle East, the Levant, has its very own tradition where harmony more than conflict actually characterizes the overall picture, but conflict of course does arise, and often as the consequence of bad politics. So that's perhaps something that we'll be returning to later. But I don't want to say much more myself. I would like to invite you to turn your attention to Dr. Dumbravă and her recent experiences, which feed directly into her current research. So thank you very much, and please go ahead. And you should be able to share your PowerPoint from your screen.
Yes, I will try to do it. 1 second. First of all, thank you for having me to the seminar. And I will start the PowerPoint. I hope to manage to do many things in the very same time. So first I have to share the screen. Right? 1 second. Yes. Okay.
Yes.
It is already.
Yes, we can see it.
Available. Okay, good. You can see it. Mm-hmm. So I will because actually my paper is rather long, and the discussion, I think there will be many questions. I will prefer to start, and I'm pretty sure that people already wrote the long abstract that I offered to you, and you divided to sent it to every person, and so. Before I start in my lecture, since the subject is quite sensitive, I would like to state two things at the outset. One, this is a research in progress, not definitive, where the priority is to synthesize a fairly extensive volume of documents found from several archives, especially Beirut and Bucharest. These documents offer me the possibility of sketching out a history, mainly ecclesiastical and university teaching, that is very often seen from a political point of view. Obviously, it's more than ecclesiastical and university teaching history, but however. And second, my exposition is based only on the documents before I can claim or state that I have outlined a general analytical framework leading to conclusions. The only advantage I feel I have in analytically constructing this topic in the coming months will be my multi-phased academic preparation through not that of transnational justice. Well, I mean, I'm only historian and I will not make justice to anyone. Thanks to the detailed documentation that I had the opportunity to consult, today I can speak of a laboratory of Islamic Christian education, founded and developed in the same time frame as the civil war in Lebanon, more precisely in Beirut. Consequently, within the same framework, there are massacres, struggles between the various factions or either side of the Green Line, and finally, almost invisibly, a mutual pacifying vision put in action by a group of professors at St. Joseph University in Beirut. I think it is useful to briefly specify the fact that the ethnic and religious configuration in Lebanon is really different compared to its territorial dimension. It's very rich, actually. The dimension is small, but the richness of religious and ethnic people is great. It is a country that now has about 7 million citizens, if I'm not wrong, of which more than 1 million are refugees only, mainly Palestinians, Kurds, Syrians. These refugees arrived in Lebanese territory in several waves, but in any case, after 1950, these refugees are, whether it is the foundation of the state of Israel in the case of Palestinians, the flight from Turkey, Kurds, in the case of the Kurds, or the recent war in Syria in the case of Syrians throughout the last century and at the beginning of the new millennium, they reside in various parts of Lebanon as well as in Beirut. Now, according to United Nations High Commissioner for People, statistics 75.6% are Muslims, so Sunni, Shia, Alawite, Ismailis, and 32.4% are Christians. The wider group of Maronites, the Greek Orthodox and other smaller groups, Latin Roman Catholics, Melkite Catholics, Armenian Orthodox, Syriac Orthodox, and Iraqi Christians, Assyrians, Chaldean Catholics, Copts, Protestants, Presbyterian, and Seventh-day Adventists, and finally 4.62% are the Druze group, concentrated in the rural areas in the mountain east of south of Beirut. Even there have monasteries actually in the Druze part of the mountains. The Jewish community is also almost non-existent in Lebanon, despite their presence in 9/11, as they came from the Mediterranean regions. Their community prospered during the French Mandate, but civil war forced their relocation to Israel. I have seen the Jewish cemetery in Beirut, located not far from St. Joseph University, unfortunately in a sorry state. Magen Abraham Synagogue, although restored after 2008, was again damaged after 2020 explosion. And there are also groups that are not recognized by the Lebanese state: Baha'is, Buddhists, Hindus, the Neo-Protestants, so on. The structure of current Lebanese parliament, secondly, Taif Agreement 1989, should also specify. This is banality, but I repeat it for someone who is not familiar with the history of Lebanon. There is to be an equal number of Christians and Muslims. The Speaker of the Parliament is a Shia Muslim, the Prime Minister is a Sunni Muslim, and the President of the state is a Maronite Christian. For now, I do not think it's necessary to go into the details of various factions of the civil war, but maybe I will enter in the subject at the right time and I will try to speak. However, they interrelate and permutate according to the ethno-religious diversity then and now in the territory. That is all about. So I will try to explain who are the founders of the Institute of Islamic Christian Studies in Beirut, who are the persons. And I will start with Professor Yusufi Bish, which was born in 1926 and passed away in 2003. Professor Bish was in the last years of his life the director of Al Furqan Islamic Heritage Foundation and is remembered as a figure strongly focused on the promotion of Islamic culture, as he was also appreciated outside in the Islamic world. He was born in Damascus in 1926, as I said, and had a Syrian Kurdish paternity. He did his undergraduate degree at the American University in Beirut, after which he continued with his PhD at Harvard with the Scottish historian Orientalist Sir Hamilton Gebb, then James Richard Jewett Professor of Arabic at Harvard. Incidentally, the latter has had his alma mater at the University of Edinburgh and School of Oriental and African Studies, London. Yusufi Bish went on to become a professor then in American University in Beirut, where he taught from 1960 till 1984. During his time, he not only offered lecture to the institute, but also arranged for the student from the institute to come to the American University of Beirut, as access was difficult in East Beirut, where San Joseph University and the Oriental Library was located. From 1985, he was invited as a lecturer at the American University in Washington, and was also a distinguished professor in 1985 and 1989 at Cambridge University. He published many studies and books, and I will mention only two of them. The Political Doctrine of al-Bakalni, Oriental Studies, American University of Beirut, and together with Elena Marculescu, Rothko Chapel, Houston, Texas, Contemplation and Action in World Religions, selected papers from the Rothko Chapel Colloquium Traditional Modes of Contemplation and Action in 1978. He was brilliant, actually, and I was amazed actually reading about him. Unfortunately, he passed away, and there is only one professor that is still living in Beirut from all these four. And this is Professor Hisham Nashabeh, born in 1931 in Tripoli, Sunni Muslim, as well as I said, Yusuf Bish. He was the Secretary General of the UNESCO Nation Commission for Lebanon, trustee of the Institute for Palestinian Studies. Since 2011, he was the chairperson of the Board of Trustees of Makassat University of Beirut, director of Makassat Higher Institute for Islamic Education. I had the opportunity to visit and meet Hisham Nashabeh in person in Beirut in February 2020. He was very distinguished presence, and we talked for over an hour. Although I had no serious documentation at that time, I understood that the close relationship between Skrima and Dr. Nashabeh was like that, not only because of their collaboration in university classroom, but also because of the civil rights of the Palestinian population in the Middle East, their status of refugees. As far as I know, at this stage of my research, it was not a matter of being part of the Palestinian political faction in the Lebanese territory, but rather a vocation to moderate the tone of the Muslim religious Sunni elite and to have his informal contribution to the peace process in the Middle East. The archival documents, for example, the correspondence between Father Augustin de Prelatur and Father Scrima, never reveal any political details or preference for any groups fighting in a civil war of Palestinian origin. Professor Nashabeh left me with the impression of a person with an aristocratic and courteous nature, always grateful for the relation with Father Scrima in this critical time. His position as a Secretary General of UNESCO National Commission of Lebanon remains a reformer, the reformer, and is still a historiographical point to be clarified for myself and for other people. Then I will speak shortly about Augustin de Prelatur, who was the director of the l'Institut d'études islamo-chrétiennes. Here you have a photo historical photo from the aula, from the classroom, and he is rather young here. He passed away in 2011 and was born in France, Colmar Rhin in January 1921. He graduated in classical literature from the University of Grenoble in 1942, and in philosophy for the Faculty of Philosophy, Societatis Iesus in Valpré-le-Puy, France, in 1946. He completed his master degree in philosophy at the University of Lyon in 1950. He then went to study for his PhD at the Gregorian University in Rome, which he completed in 1961. He speaks several languages in addition to his mother tongue, namely Arabic, English, German, and Italian, and he has a perfect knowledge of ancient Greek and Latin. In 1965, he became professor of dogmatic theology at Saint Joseph University in Beirut. He was head of department of continuing education in the Institut Supérieur at the Institut Supérieur de Sciences Religieuses, and director of Institut d'études islamo-chrétiennes. Father Augustin has published several studies on patrology, and many volumes have been coordinated and edited by him. Augustin de Prelatur was also crucial in his vision regarding Islamic Christian relations through his time in Beirut. Cardinal Jean-Louis Tauran, president of the Pontifical Council of Interreligious Dialogue, remember him as one of the most influential people in Beirut University elite, and in opposing fundamentalism of all kinds, both Christian and Islamic. Considering his connection with Father Andrei Scrima, I believe he was most likely extremely close, given his theological and philosophical training and background, as well as his ethical and otherness rigor with different Christian denomination and the Islamic religion. In fact, the two of them have achieved a great deal together. First of all, an original system of teaching which allowed people of different faiths to reflect themselves in each other with the greatest respect while keeping their religious identity intact. Secondly, they have always combated religious fanaticism of all kinds, putting in place a method of interreligious multidisciplinary study. And he was extremely close to Father Scrima, actually. They were very good friends, actually. And the correspondence is still unpublished. I published just one article many years ago, and now I am going to publish a book and I would put and I will publish part of this correspondence. That part which I retain is very important. There are few letters which that are not relevant for the research and mainly with pecuniary details, salaries and so on. So I don't want to publish it. But soon we will have a book. I mean, I hope so. I will try to speak a bit about Father Scrima. He was born in 1925 and passed away in 2000. Orthodox monk, at the time member of spiritual father, at the time member and spiritual father of St. George Orthodox Monastery, Der Hal, belonging to the Archdiocese of the Orthodox of Mount Lebanon, Orthodox Church of Antiochia. Patriarch of Constantinople, Athenagoras I, nominated him Archimandrite of Constantinople, and later his observer at the Vatican Council from 11 October 1962 till 8 December 1965. His education is astonishing. He made a BA in mathematics and lesson in philosophy and theology as well. His dissertation was published post-mortem, apophatic anthropology. He made a PhD under TRV Murti on the ultimate its methodological and epistemological connotation according to the Advaita Vedanta, unpublished. He was good friend with Father Raimond Panikkar. They met in India, and I truly believe that Father Panikkar introduced him to the Enrico Castelli, which was a philosopher. He made epistemologist, but he was busy with the philosophy of religions. And then Scrima was invited, and Panikkar as well, to the famous Castelli's seminary in Rome. And many of acts were published, and they're a wonderful reference to understand that part of Forma Mentis of Andrei Scrima. And the president of India visited Bucharest in early 1950s. And while in the Orthodox Patriarchal Palace, he met Father Scrima, who impressed him with his knowledge of Sanskrit and his recitation from the Katha Upanishad. This is a sort of, I don't know if it's truly like that, but it seems that it was like that. Many people confirm this anecdota. He was happy to offer him a scholarship in India shortly. Before leaving for India, Scrima went to Château de Beausset, the Interconfessional Ecumenical Center near Geneva, set up by the World Council of Churches, where he met Christophe Dumont, director of the Dominican Ecumenical Center Istina and editor for Journal Istina in Paris, and later Marie-Dominique Chenou and Louis Bouillet, leading names of the Catholic intellectual elite. Andrei Scrima was one of the most influential Orthodox monks at the time on the Second Vatican Council, not only participating as a personal observer of the Ecumenical Patriarch, but also as the person who created the direct link between the Pope Paul VI and Patriarch Athenagoras I at the most important event of 20th century for the Catholic world. In addition, Scrima, introduced by Belgian Cardinal Leon Joseph Suenens, was one of the contributors to the commentaries of the council documents Lumen Gentium Gaudium et Spes Dei Verbum, alongside theologians such as Henri de Lubac, Jean Danielou, Yves Congar, Gérard Philippe, Roger Schulz, Karana. Finally, he was present at the meetings of Pope Paul VI with the Patriarch Athenagoras in the Holy Land in Jerusalem on 6 January 1964. and Constantinople in 25 July 1967, and finally in Rome in October 1967. This position further enabled Scrima to be highly respected, as he was immediately welcomed as a thinker who united the two churches. Scrima will reside in Lebanon between Deir Harf and Beirut from 1969, and beginning 1970 will become a lecturer at the Saint Joseph University Beirut and the Maronite University of the Holy Spirit Catholic. When he returned to Romania in 1991, he had to give up his academic duties and also had to leave the monastic community of the Antioch Orthodox St. George's Monastery. There, the monks are the custodians of another part of Scrima's archive, as I mentioned before, as well as the publisher of his various texts with a strong theological and monastic. I have been to the monastery twice and have permanent contact with the community and the Orthodox archdiocese of the Mount Lebanon, archdiocese of Mount Lebanon. In various articles, I have also made an introduction to the more mystical side of the community, which is strongly animated by the Jesus prayer, acquired through the careful supervision of Father Andrei Scrima. His biography, like all the others, is much richer in content, but I have to limit myself, and I put here only what I consider useful here. Then I will, well, these are the 4 professors, but there is a patron, the person who offered money to the Institute for Dominique de Menil-Schlamberger. She was born in 1998 and passed away in 1997. Her full name is Dominique Isaline Zelia Henriette Clarisse Schlamberger, and she was the daughter of very famous Alsatian Calvinist inventor Conrad Schlamberger, together with his brother Marcel, both educated at the School of Engineering in France. Conrad invented the system of electrical measurement of mineral exploration known as Schlamberger array. Years later, they founded the Schlamberger Wealth Surviving Corporation based in Houston, Texas. Dominique Schlamberger studied physics and mathematics at the Sorbonne and had an interest in film and technology. Well, even Scrima was the one who graduated in mathematics, and he knew very well physics, and I think it was apart of theology, mathematics and physics, and their minds, their former mentors were very fit. They were synchronized in some way. She converted to Catholicism in 1932 as soon as she married the banker Jean de Menil. At the time of World War II, she moved to New York, then to Houston, Texas. Jean de Menil became the president of Schlumberger Overseas, Middle East and Far East, and Schlumberger Surenco, Latin America. Both linked with the multinational company Schlumberger Limited. Until now, they are to the Nasdaq, and they are famous even today. Together with, Dominique becomes a widow in 1973, but together with Jean, however, they founded the Menil Foundation, famous for a large number of paintings, sculptures, religious art, sketches, photographs, rare books, etc. Mother of 5 children, the last of whom is the leader of Sufi order in New York, Philippa de Menil. In 1971, the Menil family founded the Rothko Chapel, where huge paintings by Mark Rothko are exhibited, and where they mounted also the Byzantine frescoes that were later returned to Cyprus. In 1986, together with the former US President Jimmy Carter, Dominic founded the Carter Maniel Human Rights Foundation, complementing 2 decades of human rights activism. They were very close, very, very close. I mean, even the people Nashabe, the professor Nashabe confirmed me this, I mean. And since the 1960s, John and Dominique Duménil have focused on the civil rights movement and started a courageous research project, The Image of the Black in Western Art in Houston. Also in 1969, they tried to assemble Baron Newman broken obelisk to celebrate the violent death of Martin Luther King Jr., but it was not accepted by Houston political elite, and they mounted it in front of the Rothko Chapel. This is to make you understand the insane courage of activists in times of extreme hostility to African Americans. I mean, even if you think about it, you know, I became trembling. Even in the Middle East, they have continued to support the rights of Palestinian refugees and have founded the Institute of Islamic Christian Studies for over 2 decades. Returning to the Carter Maniel Foundation, it should be pointed out that they founded the Carter Maniel Human Rights Prize, also sponsored by the Rothko Chapel, as well as Oscar Romero Award after the assassination of Catholic Bishop Oscar Arnulfo Romero Gadamesh by a hitman commissioned by the government of San Salvador. Dominique visited Lebanon several times, and the entire in both in 1970s and 1980s, being very close to the academic projects of SCRIMA and the entire academic staff of the Institut d'études islamo-chrétiennes. I had the opportunity to read the epistolary between Dominique Duménil and André SCRIMA in the SCRIMA archive at New York College in Bucharest, and I must say that although it is still restricted from publication and sometimes even for consultation, it is a correspondence with many reflections on the situation and conflict in Middle East, and as well as theological ones. Between SCRIMA and Dominique Duménil, this theological exchange ideas was truly powerful and to a very high level. I hope that I will get the chance to take something from this correspondence and to communicate to the scientific groups and to the center, who knows. Well, now I think it's better to, this is a wonderful picture with Dominique Duménil and Father SCRIMA to their heart in the monastery. And I think it was made in 1980s, and she was familiar even with the monastic community in their heart. She was very ecumenic, very open-minded, and an extraordinary personality. Even she was speaking very little. There are someone to offer a biography, actually a monographic dedicated to the Maniel Foundation, a journalist in New York. And I think to go to the Maniel Foundation and to get the chance to study the archive, mainly for his relationship with Carter, and to see exactly if there is a direct link between her activity in Middle East and the Camp David Accords. This is a very interesting point. I know that many people are not agreeing with Camp David Accords, and I must say that many documents in the archive of in Bucharest which belonging to the André SCRIMA collection are related with the situation in Palestine and about Jerusalem and all this and all the situation, critical situation in Middle East. And I think it's still a lot of work to do. And first of all, to be able to trigger all this documentation, and then to complete it and to have a general picture, seeing the archive in Houston. That would be maybe another complementary project to that one that I'm working on. And it is rather interesting to reconstruct the history of these accords from another point of view, from another kind of primary sources, which are not at all political, but all these documents are belonging to the private collection, or there are also documents from the ecclesiastical world, mainly the Catholic world. So this history should, I mean, it might be viewed from another point of view. When, well, now I will continue after this parenthesis. When faith animates science, the purpose and method of teaching at the IAIC. There are many documents, some of them edited, that explain the purpose and structure of teaching at the Institute. An article by Dumbravă and Hisham Nashabet, but part of this information I find it under the firm of Andrei Scrima, and Dumbravă specified in his papers, travel paper, Journal de Travaux, that Scrima offered him 80% of his materials in justifying the existence of the Institute, and not only. And so he's a real thinker, but I think he's modest because he has also a philosophical formation, and he was also able to reconfigure the epistemology of this kind of new discipline. So they published in 1989 in Solidarité Orient. It's not so, it's almost inaccessible today, l'Institut d'études islamo-chrétiennes de Beirut. And both professors point to the fact that in Lebanon there is a long existence of institutions and various bodies dedicated to Islamic studies and Oriental studies. Even in the American University of Beirut and San Joseph University, there are institutes that carry out valuable research in the field, but their methodological approach is often one-sided. On one hand, Islamic studies enjoy Islamologists who treat Islam as an object in the perfect rationalist scientific line. On the other hand, Islam is treated in a fideistic, even fundamentalist tone. Even the same for the studies of Christianity, often between Religionswissenschaft and confessionalism. The Institute project promotes a change in the relationship between science and faith, focusing on the fact that religions cannot be studied by emphasizing only those disciplines that aim to understand the religious phenomenon. Faith is driving force behind the study of religions, and without faith, not even religious science will exist. Therefore, teaching should favor, and I quote, un esprit de recherche suivant une méthode déjà éprouvée selon un mode pluridisciplinaire. Il pouvait faciliter chez les professeurs déjà formés à cette méthode par leur formation universitaire le dépassement de temps fanatisme partisan et la sécurité de l'objectivité devant un auditoire d'étudiants enclins déjà à la critique et appartenant aux deux confessions. I continue to summarize in English their explanation in this institute. The very faith of the professor is part of his objectivity. The essence of this teaching is therefore the reflection of believers, Christians and Muslims, in line with their own religious tradition, and based on a deep scientific knowledge and internally assimilated with a personal commitment. For example, for the past 2 years, for research have been applying, they explained in the article, the method of rhetorical analysis to text from rhetoric analysis to text from the Old and New Testaments for the Christian tradition and Hadith from the Muslim tradition. Another project to gather basic texts relating to Christian-Muslim exchanges with particular emphasis on official statements by religious authorities and declaration from conferences or symposia. It was a sort of a new trigger and analyze of theological language, both Christian and Muslim. The aim of this project is to clarify the essential attitude of different Muslim and Christian communities towards these exchanges and to analyze their components and motivations. Finally, it appeared important to organize sessions on medical ethics, where Muslim and Christian nursing students from the different nursing schools in Beirut to better understanding of the position of their different religious communities on the fundamental problems of human life, illness and death, and on the problems posed in the different fields of medical practice. If you know, it is a sort of avant la lettre, the question of euthanasia or another kind of bioethics. You know, they in the late 80s, early 80s started to trigger this kind of, analyze this kind of subject, which are belonging now to a very specific discipline, which is bioethics. And actually, I'm going to publish recently an edition, a critical diplomatic edition of the L'amour passage au limite. It is a course that I find in Beirut in the archive of the Jesuits, Résidence des Jésuits, and I've already delivered an article in introducing the matters of this course, and it is amazing because we find actually Scrima explained the death from the historical, religious historical point of view, then bioethics, and finally phenomenological point of view, not rather Christian, but anyway, phenomenological point of view. And often in this manuscript, I found questions which are belonging to bioethics. Research topics. In 1979-1980, a first line of research addressed the question, does the conscience of faith exercise a critical function on the world order? A second line of research deals with the question of that modernity possess to Christianity and Islam. Subsequently, a topic emerged that was important for highlight the deep structure of the respective tradition. Another theme another issue was emerged, scripture and form research into the foundation and meaning of spiritual language in Christian and Islamic art. So it is a sort of, this course is amazing. It's a sort of semasiological treaty. So it's a sort of dictionary of semantic analysis of theological language and terms. So it's amazing. They had really a brilliant mind. In concrete terms, two professors, one Christian and one other Muslim, both academics agreed to compose their courses according to a similar structure. And in front of the same students, they take turns, one listening to another's lecture and intervening when necessary. In this way, the research is done in common and is enriched by the reciprocal contribution of each religious tradition. For each of the two traditions is supported by the testimony of true believers through scientific competence and high academic standards. There is also the testimony of a living faith. That is important as well. In this line, each of the professors is invited to present his own or her own religion tradition in the language of that tradition in order to oblige the listener of the other faith to a necessary change of scenery, which will then help them to penetrate the religious universe presented to them from within. That's interesting. In the comparative history of religions, the danger of a correspondence between religious elements or externally similar rites is often noted, acclaimed Scrima. Such comparison may be useful on one level, but they cannot be a starting point for understanding a certain religion. They can only provide a superficial synthesis, they claim, Scrima mainly. In order to grasp the original meaning of a religion, one needs to get a glimpse of a religion. It is necessary to grasp the nucleus, the core, the very heart, which gives its constituents elements, their articulation and their deep hierarchy. Now this core, this principle of both unification and creativity is that emerging truth where the revelation stands and which guarantees and criticizes the external formulation. Although convergence may appear between the views and conceptions of God and in the world corresponding to the two religions, at the base, it is the difference which is more particularly perceived and underlined. This difference cannot be reduced, otherwise we will end up with a syncretism that will deny the originality and specificity of religion. On the contrary, it must be maintained for the sake of truth and the preservation of authenticity. And it is from this difference that a real and authentic collaboration can be built. What actually presided over the origin of the Institute at the time of the constituent meetings. I have taken the liberty of leaving the voice of the founders, who have been very careful to specify their purpose with the Institute, their methodological approach, and their epistemological choices. Of course, this opened up the question of historical comparative approach in history of religion or religious studies. We know that the great historian of religions, mainly Raffaele Petazzoni, has reflected with great care the epistemic area of the discipline. However, religions are considered as object of study completely devoid of their substance, namely the faith. The religious text, the artifact, or any historical element that connects and is related to religions or the religious phenomenon are completely considered by virtue of their historical and historiographical context. Understanding this religious phenomenon could be something more. Think the professor who reject the confessional approach in the study of true religion, as well as fides, that is the blind attitude of trusting in the truth of religious doctrine. Explaining and understanding religion automatically involves reason, but faith is the essence, the core of internal epistemic elaboration, which cannot be denied to the believer either. That's the crucial point, actually. I don't know if the historians of religions and actually part of my work, because I'm doing history of religion as well, is ready to accept it. But how you can teach the monotheistic religions or the true religion in comparative ways without, in Lebanon or in a Middle East context, without considering the faith? And I think it's very useful to reflect on this kind of interrogation. I have another point. I don't know if I have another time to.
Yes, maybe 5 more minutes.
Oh, 5, okay. So I have some testimony. What do we find outside the classroom? I said, and I have some testimonials, and I tried to have some voices. I mean, I took from the correspondence some témoignages explaining actually what their perception considering the war. And I tried to translate from French into English. And for example, in 24 June 1978, Augustin de Prelatour communiquait to Father Scrima, malheureusement, il est difficile de passer dans la zone ouest à cause de francs tireurs sporadiques et brusquement bloquent le passage. And another one, which is rather powerful, I guess. Vous devrez suivre de près la situation libanaise. Un moment. Nous avons eu ces derniers temps d'après-midi et de nuit agités. Il est vraiment impensable dans l'état actuel des choses de songer de reprendre la vie universitaire dans notre quartier. Pour ce qui concerne l'Institut d'études islamo-chrétiens, il faudra sans doute penser à un local à Beirut Ouest, tout en regrettant alors la part de notre auditoire d'infirmerie. Mais les professeurs musulmans ne viendront jamais à Beirut Est. Nous y gagnerons peut-être les étudiants de American University in Beirut. En tout cas, vendredi prochain, nous faisons passer leur examen aux étudiants de l'école d'infirmerie dans le bureau de Nashabeh. And the last one, I have actually the English translation is not, it's not needed to repeat it. And I will pass to the one interesting frame and témoignage. Vivons partout un découragement profond à l'est comme à l'ouest, car tout issue semble absent. L'Aube a pu terminer ses cours et ses étudiants sont maintenant en période d'examen. Mais Nashabeh m'avouait son énervement de trouver sur tous les arbres du campus des portraits de Khomeini. Il m'a avoué l'autre jour avec tristesse, car je tâche de traverser Beirut de temps en temps pour le raconter, que j'étais maintenant le seul chrétien avec lequel il demeurait en contact. Il avait de renoncer avec Ibish en table ronde en Telia à cause de la difficulté de l'insécurité de fameux passage à Beirut.
Can you show the picture? Because for the translation, for those who...
Yes, of course. Yes, sorry. It is now.
Wait. Yeah, it's okay. So, yeah, so that people can read. Yes, thank you.
Yeah. Actually, it's much easier to read it. Yeah. Well, I believe that the testimonies are convincing enough to give us an idea of the hostile atmosphere in of the EA members, the institute members, to their permanent traveling status for more than 2 decades. Instead, I would like to talk about other documents I have found in the archive, especially the Scrima collection at the New York College that concern Jerusalem. I have little time for that, but I will do it. Scrima had collected these documents for which he had also prepared response in his turn. One of these documents is entitled Christian Support Unified Jerusalem, prepared by Interreligious Affairs Department of the American Jewish Community, with an introduction by Rabbi Mark Tannenbaum, a American rabbi from Baltimore, an activist for human rights and social justice. He too was involved in the drafting of various council documents from Vatican, including Nostra Aetate. Returning to the 4 months mentioned document, it is a miscellany from 1970s in which various prestigious Christian theologians for all denominations, evangelical, Roman Catholic, Protestants, ecumenical, and interreligious groups, reflection from Catholic leaders in the international and local press, comment on the issue of the internationalization of the holy city, Jerusalem, which actually is very actual even today. The background to the whole issue was the so-called Judaisation de Jerusalem, Judaization of Jerusalem, which obviously it was very offensive, and the reunification of Jerusalem under a single jurisdiction, that of Israelis, recognizes the legitimacy of the rights of the Arab population. On the other hand, the Muslim position was to return in East Jerusalem to Muslim control, which was established in 1948 in the wake of Jordanian military occupation of the Holy City in violation of the 1947 UN partition plan, their point of view. Rabbi Tannenbaum was disturbed, and I quote, "The recent UN Security Council debate undoubtedly has reinforced that impression, especially since the Jordanian representative cited a whole range of Christian spokesmen, from Pope Paul VI to the National Council of Churches, as being uniformly identified with the Muslim position." So that, what is to say is that at that time, the question of the status of Jerusalem was under the observation of the entire world, and the Christian people, most of them were belonging to the Muslim position, and the Muslim position to the Christian one. And only the evangelical, Protestants were actually prepared to recognize the new status of Jerusalem under the Israeli control. On the one hand, there are the evangelical Christians, as I said, which are in perfect agreement with the Israeli position, and on another hand, the rest of the Christian world, the Vatican, World Council, Western Orthodox, and the Muslim elite. But who are the Christians that Tannenbaum refers to as being aligned with the Israeli position? He said that evangelical Christians have understood that in the past, the restoration of the Jewish people to Jerusalem represented the fulfillment of biblical prophecies. Likewise, theologians such as Karl Rahner, at that time one of the most authoritative voices in the Catholic world, states, "I cannot see the return of Jerusalem to Israel constitutes a real theological problem for a Christian such that reason of faith will compel him to oppose the return. Of course, I cannot recall all the voices in the document, but hundreds of pages confirm the fact that the question of the status of Jerusalem, it is at the heart of the entire Christian world in the Middle East and beyond, generating a kind of solidarity with the Muslim position, especially the moderate Sunni ones. I limit myself only to the documents I consulted and no further. My decision to propose as a hypothesis to be contemplated the link between the 4 professors of the Institute and their activities beyond the university classrooms. These activities relating to the major problems in the Middle East, such as the status of Palestinian refugees, the status of Jerusalem, the efforts for peace, which then ended up with the Camp David Accord, seems to me realistic. As I wrote into my abstract, there is not a direct causal link between these political entities, but rather a think tank of Islamic Christian theological relation where peace in the Middle East and the stability of the Palestinian community in the Lebanese context and beyond enucleates a basis for a light discussion of both communities. The main purpose of the Institute's activity was primarily to build the theoretical basis for mutual respect between the 2 religious communities, given the massacres of infamous fight between the various Lebanese factions. Secondly, it was a question of forming an intellectual elite that, at least in Islamic Christian relation, will be able to explain the theological basis of the two religious identities without slipping into the apologetic approach of any religion. Thank you very much. I think
Thank you.
I will stop here.
Yes, if you could just unshare, just get us back into the pictures. If you click on the top, or maybe I can do that. Or you can leave it up. No, it's better if we see each other. Yeah.
That one?
I could do it, yes. So I forgot. Yes, so thank you very much. Before I open the floor to the discussion, this is what I would describe to my students as an example of a microhistory, because it describes the close-knit community that existed between thinkers and religious practitioners who operate in a very difficult situation, in a very difficult situation. Yes. Namely, not just of actual warfare, but of a situation which did not allow different sides to communicate with each other for reasons of security, such as the snipers who you mentioned. It was very unsafe to go into the Muslim part, for example,
Yes.
or vice versa. Importantly, it is also a world which still continues to exist because of the tensions that the unresolved Palestinian question brings along, and the unresolved Lebanese situation, because this is, we don't have the space to include the current situation in Lebanon, but I know from friends that this is a very, it creates difficulties at various levels, which in one way or another go back to the time of the Civil War.
Right.
That's a very simplified version. I found it very interesting, that's the last thing that I'll say, that you're making a difference between religion and faith. And that is perhaps a key to unlocking the stalemate that we have, because faith itself does not create communities. It's religion that creates communities. And
Right.
once these communities are in conflict with each other, then it is very difficult to resolve it. But at this point, I would like to invite the others in the room to come up with questions. Who would like to ask?
Yeah, maybe I can tell to the people that when I was in Beirut the last time, I mean, I felt I was, I ended up in Beirut after 2 days when the Shia community started to protest against the judge, I mean, the person who was judging the case of the deflagration in 2020. And when I arrived at the airport, I was, I mean, people stopped me. I mean, you know, the Hezbollah controlled the airport. That is the reality. And they were amazed that someone is coming to see Lebanon and I mean in Beirut and to make research in a way. And I was a woman. I mean, I don't felt afraid and threatened at all, but they put me in the office for more than 20 minutes until they get the time to verify everything. And then I was obviously free to go. And when I took the car and when I arrived to the residence des Jésuites, there are many rumors. It was a sort of talk of the Iranian spiritual leader, and people were shooting on the air. And I was rather shocked because nobody told me that this is a custom. This is and then yeah, of course it was a bit like that, you know, with some emotion, some, you know, it's always like that, an adventure. But then I started to speak to the people in the university, with the Christians ones, and in the Saint Joseph University, many Muslim are coming, and I was participating to a Sufi concert, which was amazing. They are in a wonderful relationship. I mean, they cultivate actually this relationship until today. And the young people are so natural in that Catholic environment. They don't, they are simply natural. So I don't know, the conflict, it's maybe the reason of the conflict, it's staying in another part, not quite in the religious part. But what it is important is that this education system, by the way, I make a parenthesis, in Lebanon, in Beirut, there are only 50 universities, obviously confessional, non-confessional, scientific, and many denominations are their own university, and so on and so on. So that means that people are instructed. Many people are speaking 5 of 8 languages, very normal. Normal, is for them, is natural. So in the university, in Saint Joseph University, where is actually a famous department of religious studies as well, where belonging first as a department of this institute, actually, because it was the first department of des études islamo-chrétiennes, and after it became an institute. They have a huge library with Arabic fundamental texts, sacred texts, and a lot of hundreds of books and documents and so on. And they are very rigorous. I mean, the students, by the way, both Christians and Muslims are accepted. And it is a wonderful place to be. Only that, well, in this period, the professors are a bit scared, but because they are not paid by the state, and they have to accept the situation that they can't take from the bank rather than a certain 10% of their own normal salaries. And I think that spirit of revolution, which I felt it in February 2020, rather disappeared in 2022. And people are not so optimistic. Well, Alison.
Yes, Alison has her hand up. Yes,
she's the one to have courage to put me a question.
Thank you so much. I've kind of read a little bit of the writings of Andrei Scrima, but I don't, you know, you're talking about him as set him much more into context. I kind of read him as this kind of, I don't know, almost like eccentric who did all these amazing things, you know, but it's fascinating to hear more, and particularly about his archive and everything. Yes. I'm just particularly interested also in Metropolitan George Choder in London, and I'm wondering, was he part of this initiative at all, or was he friends with these people? I mean, were there links between them?
Absolutely. He was. I mean, I visited Sua Eminenza. I visited him to the Metropolitan place, and he was rather old and maybe a little bit annoyed by the people. But when I was speaking about Scrima, he clearly, I mean, briefly said to me he was a saint and a genius. Well, it was, I quote him. Well, he was very active, actually, and he was very critical. And I mean, if you see, his language is terrible in respect of many situations, considering the Israeli part of the of these negotiations in the civil war. And he was the founder of Le Mouvement des Jeunes Orthodoxes. And I've met a lot of people who were belonging to this movement. Oh, of course, I've met plenty of, yes, sorry.
Sorry, I was wondering, I mean, did members of this movement study at the institute that you've discussed, the Islamic Christian Institute?
This is a very good question. I think they prefer to have Father Scrima rather as a sort of spiritual leader, and they expected from Father Scrima to teach them the Jesus prayer, and they were mainly directed by the mystical part of the Orthodoxy. And because Father Scrima was ordained priest in that archdiocese, actually, in their heart. He became a priest in their heart, and then he received the role of his spiritual father. And then he was member of a famous group in Bucharest in 40s, Le Mouvement de Buisson Ardent, the Burning Bush movement. And he was a person who has the incessant Jesus prayer. They accepted him to teach this prayer because he gained it in a permanent way. I mean, he was truly spiritual. So, and there is another father who also was invited by le Mouvement de Jeunes Orthodoxes, Father Gilles. I'm not remembering exactly.
Lev Gillet.
Lev Gillet, oui.
Lev Gillet.
And also he also was a pillar of the movement. And for example, I was amazed that one of the members, which spoke with me for hours in Beirut, she said that we didn't have not even the liturgical books in Arabic. So the community started to translate, first of all, the homilies of Father Scrima, and then some texts, and to try to the Typicon and so on, and try to these ladies started to translate something connected to the iconography and so on. So they were very poor in Arabic language, liturgical text, and so on. And they expected from Scrima and from the fathers a sort of living tradition, living God, not a theoretical God, but a living God. And that was manifested through the Jesus prayer. And they were very happy to, and by the way, many Catholics started to ask to Father Scrima as well to join Dominican communities, for example, male and female, to teach them the Jesus prayer. And he was very happy to share it. It was a very discreet work. Even his writings, sometimes he published in Istina without his name. He simply firmed as non-Orthodox because he was the Securitate from the Romanian security was trying to follow him through various personages. I don't want to enter into this debate, this subject, because it's very complex, and we have more time. We need more time to explain. But in the 60s, he was terribly, I mean, the Securitate claimed that he was the most important and influential monk to be followed, and to try to convince him to become a metropolitan for the diaspora in order to have it in their own hands. And he was afraid to speak with the Romanian priests. I mean, but I think that's why he tried to do his work in a very discreet way, not secret, but discreet. It's a huge difference. And by the way, Christian is acting like that. A mystic is acting like that, in silence, doing things, not commenting on things. I mean, he was delivering a lot of papers, when he was asked for, but in a discreet way. Yeah.
So what is the attitude today in Romania towards Scrima, and are his views on Islamic Christian relations, are they part of kind of the, I don't know, what the average Romanian Orthodox today would
hopefully in Romania
help them to kind of view Muslims in a more positive way? Or
Oh, that's a very, very, very good question. You know why? Because in one hand, they try to recover the monastic phase of Scrima. I mean, the monastic activity and marriage and what you want. But from, they didn't, I mean, they are, it's difficult for them to understand Christianity belonging to the Muslims. I mean, the community, you know, the existence between these two communities, the reality of Christianity. There is another culture of Orthodox faith in Europe. That's why I'm afraid many conservators today are against, and mainly they are religious people, I mean, and they are against Muslim communities, and they didn't want to be very open to this kind of approach of Father Scrima. And I think in a very humble way, I try to explain why it's so important. If someone wants to understand, it's needed just to go once in Beirut, they will understand immediately. I mean, it's a sort of immediate perception. You can't stay in the Middle East without this connection with the Muslim community and with Muslim elites. And by the way, he tried to write a lot, and even giving the theological reason not to reject people and to pay respect for them and for their own identity. And well, actually, I have this, it is a sort of miracle that I was accepted with this research issue in the Romanian institutions. We are giving by competition, giving to me this grant. And we try to communicate all the time. I mean, in the last year, I didn't do so much communication. I refused actually to deliver talks or to deliver many papers, because I still want to write and to try to put online the writings and the courses from Lebanon in original, in French. A part of this work was done, actually was translated in Romanian without an critical edition, but still there is something. But the language, the theological language of Father Scrima and this kind of semasiology, where the repository of semantic connotation of various concepts, Christian concepts, is still very, very difficult to accept, because simply people prefer to stay in the wood language of Christianity. There is a wood language. And I don't want to criticize, obviously, but Father Scrima has his own approach, speaking often about the hermeneutical, put the hermeneutical interpretation of Christian texts in act. So that means living tradition, not only quoting tradition. Mm-hmm. And I think it was rather clear, but it's difficult to be at that level existentially, and even with our mind, maybe, because I mean, if you are not open with your heart, you are not open, you will not be open with your mind either. So, but this is the point. That, this is my duty to try, not only me, but my team was a research team, and by the way, brilliant people. Bogdan Tătaru Cazaban, for example, which he was an ambassador to the Holy See, and he published also a journal dedicated to his days in Scrima's activity in the Second Council, Vatican II. And then slightly they because of this project, that it is a sort of provocative, because they said, what means resilience in Lebanon? I mean, what do you mean about that? And I said, look, even being Christian, a practical Christian, and being with a good preparation and with a spiritual language, prepared to accept the other, that it's enough to manifest a sort of resilience and to continue to exist in that space. That's the point.
Thank you. I'm aware that we should not really go beyond the half-past mark. So are there any other questions? It's I would like to continue this conversation.
Yes, but time is rushing.
Much further, yes. But
that's the reason to have another talk, maybe.
Yes, there will be. Yeah, I mean, it reminded me, for example, also of the situation in Alexandria, Iskandaria in Egypt, where you have very strong Sufi tradition and
yes,
and of course Coptic Christian and all Islamic traditions as well, and Jewish community. So it's
yes,
you need these. It's not just a social glue. It's a kind of freedom of thinking, which communities, small communities who encourage intercommunal contacts create. And this is important in a city like Beirut. I could have asked you more about the historical background of
yes,
the Civil War period, but for that we don't have time right now. That would have been very interesting, because the contacts on both sides of the Green Line, for example, they were difficult, but they did exist. And that was a challenge which many of the religious leaders also took on them. Well, anyway.
Yes, actually, I'll be more than willing to receive another questions, even by email.
By email,
And,
I was going to say, if there are any further questions,
yes.
I can circulate your email address, and then
Yes.
we can continue this. And of course, there will be more sessions. The next one will be a round table, so you will get an invitation for this in the evening. If you're in London, anyone of you is in London, then it'll be also in person, but we will put it on the screen, and then you will recognize some of the members here who are present today.
I will be more than honored to come to London, to know in person the people there. Amazing people, yeah, an amazing initiative. I mean, that's true and unique, if I'm saying.
Well, it's not. It should be more.
It should be more.
We do a little bit. Yes. Anyway, if there are no urgent questions, then I think I would like to stop the recording here. And
yes. Thank you, Loris.